Hello guys, this is Professor LeBron. I'm going to be going through Unit 5 Landscapes, Lesson 7 Glaciers. Our learning target today is I can describe the evidence of glaciers. All right, so first things first, what are glaciers? At this point, make sure that you have your notes. All right, they look like this. Again, you're filling in the words in red on these lines here. All right, so what are glaciers? Glaciers are a slowly moving mass or river of ice formed by the accumulation or the building up and the compaction of snow on mountains or near the poles. Okay, so again, glaciers are a slowly moving mass or a river of ice that has been formed by the accumulation / building up and compaction of snow on mountains or near the poles. Okay, so they're a slowly moving mass. They're formed by the accumulation, the buildup of snow, and they occur on mountains or near the North and South Pole. Okay, so you're writing in these words in red in your notes. Next slide. All right, so let's stop and think for a second. How can a large sheet of ice move? All right, so how do we get this giant sheet / block of ice to move around? What do you think? I think it could be gravity. I think it could be the type of soil or water underneath. All right, so let's see. How does this giant block of ice move? All right, one thing that causes these glaciers to move is gravity. All right, so glaciers move from high elevation to low elevation due to the force of gravity. All right, gravity pulls them down from high elevations to low elevations. Okay, so you want to make sure that you have these words in red down. All right. These giant blocks of ice are able to move from high to low elevations due to gravity. All right, next up. All right, so we have a type of glacier called a continental glacier, and that's when ice sheets cover an entire continent, like Antarctica, for example. At least for now. All right, so these ice sheets, continental glaciers, are the kind of ice sheets that cover an entire continent. Examples given here are Antarctica, as we see here, and Greenland. All right, another type of glacier we have is called a valley glacier. They're also known as alpine glaciers. And these are streams of flowing ice found in the mountains. All right, so continental glaciers cover an entire continent. Valley glaciers are streams of flowing ice found in mountains. All right, so make sure to get the words in red in your notes. And here's a time lapse of what these valley glaciers look like when they're moving. All right, so let's stop and think for a minute. So we know what glaciers are. We know the two different types. We know they're moved by gravity. But how can we tell where glaciers used to be? How do you think these glaciers left their mark? Let's find out. All right, so this is something that you can do, you can try at home if you want to see glaciers in like real time. So this is an experiment you can do at home. It's up to you if you want to do this or not. I'm going to move on for the sake of time. Anyway, how can we tell where glaciers used to be? Here are 7 different pieces of evidence that show where glaciers used to be. Our first set of evidence is fjords, which are U-shaped valleys. 2, striations. 3, erratics. 4, till. 5, kettle lakes. 6, moraines. And 7, drumlins. All right, so these are 7 pieces of evidence that tell us where glaciers used to be. Okay, so at this point, we are in this portion of your notes. All right. First one's fjords. All right, so they are a U-shaped valley that was scraped out by a glacier. All right, so anytime you see this type of U-shaped valley, this is without any vegetation, and this is with vegetation. Anytime you see this U-shaped valley, that means it was scraped out by a glacier. So these are leftover evidence showing us that glaciers once covered this area. Fun fact, the Hudson River is a flooded ford. All right, so glaciers used to actually be where the Hudson River is. All right, so here's some other examples of forts. So these are actually very beautiful right here. They're found in Norway, Chile, New Zealand, Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. If you notice, a lot of these countries are closer to the North and South poles. Okay, here's some example of what fords around the world look like. All right, our second piece of evidence for glaciers are striations. Okay, so what are striations? They are a series of parallel lines scratched into the surface bedrock by rocks embedded in a glacier. Okay, so anytime we see these parallel lines scratched into bedrock, that means that a glacier has passed through, or a glacier once covered this area. Remember, take a moment to write the word in red in your notes. Okay, our third piece of evidence is erratics. Erratics are a boulder that is made of a different rock than those around it. All right. So when we find boulders that are made of a different rock than those around it, that means that a glacier was once covering this area. We can find erratics in actual Central Park. Example here. So that means that a glacier passed through New York. This was once covered by glaciers. All right, 4, another piece of evidence for glaciers being in an area is till. Okay, so till is unsorted angular sediment that was picked up and later dropped off by a glacier. So anytime you see this unsorted angular sediment in an area, that means a glacier was once there. All right, take a moment to write the word and write in your notes, and we're going to move on. All right, our fifth piece of evidence for glaciers are kettle lakes. So kettle lakes are shallow lakes formed by a block of glacier left behind that melts. Okay? So here, let's take a look at this picture here. We have a glacier that passed by. There's some ice left behind. All right. Then some sediment covers it a little. Then when this ice melts, it leaves a hole left behind. And then these holes fill up with water, making kettle lakes. All right, so kettle lakes are relatively shallow lakes that were formed by blocks of a glacier left behind that melted. All right, here are some examples of kettle lakes. All right, we actually also have a kettle lake in, I believe it's Long Island, Lake Ronkonkoma. All right, this is the largest of the 8 kettle lakes on New York's Long Island. So here's an example of a larger kettle lake here in Long Island. All right. Our 6th piece of evidence are moraines. So moraines are just lines of till that show the end point of a glacier. So there are lines of till that show the end point of a glacier. All right, this is an example of what they look like. All right, so be sure to write the red in your notes. All right, fun fact. Long Island is the terminal moraine of the last ice age. All right, so this is terminal moraine of the last ice age. So the ice age, or the ice, or the glaciers during the ice age came up to this point. Cool. All right, so our last line of evidence for where glaciers were in the past is drumlins. They're a small oval mound of glacial till. All right, so they're like a small oval hill that's made up of glacial till. All right, they look like this. Make sure to get that in your notes. All right, this is the New York State drumlin field here, shown here. Now we have a lot of drumlins in this area of New York State. All right, and the last part of the lesson. So there is a video on glaciers on the next slide. And these are the 4 questions that go with that video. All right, number 1 is, why are glaciers called the bulldozers of nature? The second question is, what is it called when plucked rocks scrape along the bottom of the glacier? Third, what is the deposition of sediment at the end of a glacier known as? And last video question, when did glaciers last cover the planet? All right, so you're going to keep these 4 questions in mind as you watch this video here. Once you're done with the video, you're going to write your responses here. Once you're done with that, you're going to go ahead to the check for understanding questions. on glaciers.